Okay, welcome to the stitch tutorials for the Perfect Perch treehouse design. We're going to go ahead and get started stitching, and we're going to be starting with the tree trunk and the branches. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is grab 2 strands each of 839 and 3863. So I have 2 strands of 839 here, and I have 2 strands of 3863 here. And we're going to go ahead and combine those. So you're going to put them together and then put them through your needle, which is going to give you a total of 4 strands, 2 strands of each color. And then you can just tie off a knot at the other end and we'll start stitching. So here I've got 4 strands total, 2 of each of those colors, and that will help give us the kind of the 2 color look and a little bit more texture throughout our tree trunk. Okay, we're going to start by doing a split back stitch. You could just do a split stitch too. For some reason I prefer to work in split back stitch. So to do that, you're going to come up through the fabric. I'm starting at this outer edge of the tree trunk, and I'm going to make a down stitch about a stitch length away, pull all the way through, and then I'm going to come back up through the fabric a stitch length away from my previous stitch, pull up and all the way through, and then for your down stitch, you're going to go back down about midway through your previous stitch length, and you're also going to split those strands right down the middle. Put your needle right down the middle of them and pull through. Then you'll come up a stitch length away and go back down about midway through the last stitch and put your needle straight down through the middle of those threads. Come up a stitch length away, put your needle back down midway through your previous stitch. And you'll continue that way. Now I will show you, I'm going to walk you through how to fill in the tree trunk here. You're going to I like to fill an outline of the whole tree trunk first. So basically I'm going to go up this line over here. I'm going to do a line here and here. I'll stitch here, and then I'm going to repeat that over here, stitching the outline of the whole tree trunk to start. I'll hop back on once I have that done and show you what you can do next. So I went all the way around and outlined everything. I'm right down here is where I ended. So now I'm basically just going to continue doing that. This is all going to be floral, so we're not going to worry about filling that in, but I'm going to start with right next to this kind of like column of stitching I did, and I'm just going to make another line going up right next to it. And I will work my way all the way back around to the other side. So I'll keep going. I'll go all the way up here, fill in here. This will get pretty much all filled in. Then I'll come in on the inside of here and here, go right here, up through here, through here, through here, 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 on the interior of here, and then come down right next to this line until I have it filled in again. Now, obviously, you're going to get these little branches off to the side filled in rather quickly, and then we'll have more space to fill in with the trunk. So I'll hop back on once I get to that point and kind of show you how to navigate from there on. All right, I am working on my 3rd row going around, and as I started to fill this part in, it got so close together that I kind of just went ahead and finished up filling in any empty space left on this kind of side branch. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same over here so that I'll have both these sort of side branches completely filled in. So really no right or wrong way, you're just going to kind of make sure you're maintaining the direction of the lines that you've already stitched, and just continuing to make new lines towards the center each time, right next to each other. Until you get all that space filled in. So just a little bit of space left right here. Now that I have that mostly filled in, I'll continue going all the way back down to here. Once you get the kind of tree trunks filled in, you're basically just going to start filling like up and down, up and down, up and down the length of the main part of the tree trunk to get it all filled in. So I started down here so now that I've got this all filled in, I'm going to go all the way down here, and I started this line going all the way up, and I'll just make it go all the way up to this little base of the house right here. If there's any little spaces left in there, you can just fill those in with a couple little, you know, stitches or back stitches to get that space filled in. And then I can go back down all the way to the bottom and back up. And you can also alternate, like you could come over here and fill in a couple until you meet in the middle. And then if there's any space left down here, you can just sort of fill in with some more back split stitch until you have this whole area all filled in. So hopefully that makes sense. And you're gonna get that all filled in, and then we'll go on up here to our branches at the top. All right, I have finished stitching all of the main part of the tree trunk. Now up on the branches, we're going to continue with the same thread combination, 2 strands of 3863 and 2 strands of 839, and you're going to continue filling in with the back split stitch. And on these, I like to do it much the same way. I usually outline the whole tree branch first, and then just go ahead and fill in by working another line down on the interior of those first lines you stitched until you get the whole shape filled in. And you'll repeat that for all of our other little branches, and then we'll be done with our branches. This is one of the lengthier parts. This and the leaves are the two parts that take the longest of this pattern. So we got the branches out of the way, and then we're gonna go on to a couple other things before we do the leaves so we get a little break from the tediousness, if that's a word, I don't know. Okay, anyways, so get those branches done and then we'll move on. All right, next we're gonna fill in this little like perch that the house is sitting on. This is we're gonna use all 6 strands of 839 for this. And I'm using my needle that has a little bit of the bigger eye here just to more easily get the 6 strands through. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna start by just doing a back stitch all the way across the bottom of this ledge. So for back stitch, you want to start by just making one little straight stitch out, and then you're going to come up a stitch length away. Let me zoom this in for you. And then you're going to go back down through that same hole from the previous stitch. Come up a stitch length away. Go back down through that same hole from the previous stitch. Stitch length away. It's a little far. Let's go there. And you'll work your way all the way across until you get to the other side. Once you get to the other side, you're going to go all the way back across, but you're just going to kind of offset and stagger where your stitches start and stop. So I'm going to come up like in the middle of above this stitch, and then I'll back stitch to here. This is technically like a brick stitch, but it's just going to give a little bit more texture to fill in this whole little ledge. And you'll work your way all the way back across, and then you should be able to fit in one more row across on top of this one, maybe 2, until we get this whole thing filled in. So this is just back stitch, we're just using it to fill right now. Okay, it took me about 4 rows across to completely fill in that little perch. Now I'm going to start on the treehouse. I've grabbed 3 strands of 522, and we're going to start with these windows. I like to start on the interior bars and make a straight stitch towards the middle for each line. So I'm just starting from the edge of the circle and going towards the middle each time. Once you get that done, you're just going to back stitch your way around the circle. As you're back stitching around the circle, the smaller you keep your stitch lengths, the neater your circle will look. Since we are constantly on a curve here, you want to keep your stitch lengths nice and short. And that'll give you a really nice rounded circle when you're finished. Once you finish this window, you're going to do the same thing on this one over here. Alright, so I got both my windows filled in. You can leave this one unfilled for now. We're going to use a different color for that. I'm going to do these little panels on the door. These are you're gonna continue with 3 strands of 522 for this, and we are going to satin stitch these in. So I'm starting down here at the bottom, and what I'm going to do is basically you're just going to pull a straight stitch across. Now I like to go through and kind of make some little sections for myself, so I'm going to go up a little bit away, use my thread, I'm going to pull it across and make a down stitch right underneath so that I'm keeping my lines nice and parallel. Once you get that done, you're going to go back in and you're going to fill in between, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, so now you're just going to fill in. So what you want to do is wherever you kind of ended off, I ended off up here, I'm going to go back up through the fabric right underneath, pull my needle up, and I'm going to make another straight stitch across to the other side of this little section and pull. I always want to come back up to the same side with satin stitch. It just helps it lay more neatly and makes everything tighter. So now I'm coming up right underneath the previous stitch, and I'm going to go back down across right underneath the previous down stitch. Now I'm going to come back up underneath that one. One thing that helps me with satin stitch is to kind of like really visualize where the point of that needle is going to go down. So I really want to kind of make that point go right through that line right there and push it straight down, and it helps me, I don't know, just visually it kind of helps me get the placement more correct. But that could just be after having lots of practice. There's definitely a feel you get to it once you have done a lot of satin stitch. So you can see I'm just working my way down here. And those guidelines just help to keep you on track directionally as you're filling down the doorway. Once you get this panel all filled in, you're going to fill in every other panel on the door with this same color, 3 strands of 522, and keep working with this horizontal satin stitch. So we're filling in each of these little sections individually. This one's really small, so you just have to work really, really tiny in there. If you didn't want to, you could totally just like pretend like that line's not there and you could combine these 2 sections. Also, if satin stitch isn't your jam, you could just do a, there's a couple things you could do. You could do a full satin stitch and just go all the way across if you didn't want it to be so tedious, or you could do like a back split stitch here. So options, modifications, all that kind of stuff. But go ahead and get this bottom section of the door filled in. Okay, we're going to do a couple things with 3 strands of 844. We're going to do this window right here. And again, I'm going to start off the same way I did with the other 2 windows. I'm just going to do a little straight stitch from the edge of the window to the center of the window each time for these interior lines. and then you can backstitch around the edge of the window or the frame. All right, once you have the window finished, you're gonna come up over here in the farthest to the left panel. I'm about midway up, and I'm gonna make a little 2-wrap French knot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold my needle horizontally underneath my thread. I'm gonna wrap my thread around the needle 2 times, loosen it up enough so that I can angle the needle back down, and I wanna put my needle down right next to where I came up through the fabric. Not a stitch length away, right next to it. And then you're gonna push your needle down through that knot. I'm holding the excess thread with my non-stitching hand kind of taut so that I don't lose the knot. And then I can let go, and I've got a doorknob. You can tie off a knot, and now we will fill in this part. We're gonna fill in the top part of the door with 3 strands of 3773 and a horizontal satin stitch. So sometimes when I'm starting satin stitch, I like to start with just a little straight stitch right in the middle that's going to get completely covered. And what that does is it gets the knot that's in the back out of my way for when I actually start my satin stitch, which I'm going to do right now. So I'm just going to start over here and pull across. You can make yourself some little guidelines if you want to, or you can just go ahead and get started by going up the top part of the doorway here. So I'll fill in this side of the window first, all the way up to basically here, the top of the window. And then I might come over here and fill in this part. And then once you get to the top, you can pull your strands all the way across, and you'll just gradually make them shorter and shorter to make that rounded look. I'll hop back on and show you how to do that in a second. Okay, so just to show you, I'm right here, I'm filling in the top part. So I'm basically just following those lines of that little arc shape, and I'm shortening the length of my stitches each time as I come up to the top here. I got a little bit off in my direction, but that's okay. So once I get up here, I'm just gonna do maybe 1 or 2 more. Actually, I think that's good right there. All right, so you can see that gives you that nice rounded look at the top, and you can tie off and we'll move on. Before we do the siding, we're gonna do one more thing. We're gonna outline the door with backstitch using all 6 strands of 844. So you'll just take all 6 strands of 844 and you're gonna go right at the edge of the door frame and outline it with a backstitch. Again, since this is gonna curve at the top, I'm gonna keep my stitch lengths nice and short here. And that'll make them look more legible and accommodate that curve nicely. All the way around to there. Next, we're going to fill in the siding on the treehouse. You're going to use 3 strands of 3782, and we're going to fill in the entire siding with back split stitch working vertically up and down. So basically, you're just going to start by making a whole column going up, or a whole line going up of back split stitch here. And then you'll go right back down. As you're working, you want to think of it like coloring. So you're going to fill in here, fill in here, fill in here until you get to the window. Then you'll fill in this little space above the window, and you'll fill in this little space below the window. Then you'll fill in this space, this space. Then you'll fill in the space above the door, above the window. Anywhere that you need to fill in, you're just going to have to work around the things that we already have stitched here. That was a really roundabout way of saying what I needed to say. Hopefully it makes sense. So I am just starting over here on this side for now, and I'll probably get this all filled in, and then I might start over here on this side and work my way up so I meet at the middle with the two sides. When I get to above the windows here, it's such a small space that I really just switch into more of a satin stitch to fill in this section rather than worrying about trying to get 2 stitches in to continue that sort of back split stitch look. And it's totally fine to do that. If you want to try to fit in 2 tiny stitches here, you can, but I just go a little bit quicker and just kind of switch into a satin stitch just for this little part right above the window. And then once I have a little bit more space, I switch back into the back split stitch. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, just to be clear, don't stitch into these little areas right here. So you'll end your stitching where these little spaces are, because that's going to be filled in with our florals later that are spilling over the porch. So just stitch everything until you get to there. It doesn't have to be perfect too. If it goes a little bit over or a little bit above, that's fine, because we're going to fill this in with French knots later, and we can fill around wherever your siding stitch happened to end up. Before we go to the roof, we're going to do one quick thing with all 6 strands of 844, and that's just to back stitch up each side of the house. So just this line and then this line right here, just for the back stitch, and that'll just tie in with the outline that we did on the door. So just go ahead and back stitch up here and down here, and then we can go to the roof. Last thing we need to do on the treehouse is fill in the roof. I'm using 3 strands of 402, which is a little bit of our brighter kind of orange, peachy, corally color. And you're going to also use back split stitch here, but you're just going to go horizontally with your stitching instead of vertically to contrast with the siding of the house. And same way that we filled in the house, you're just going to work all the way across and then go back and back and back and back and back and back and back until you get all the way to the top. Okay, let's move on to the second most tedious part of this project, which is we're going to be filling in all of this remaining space all the way to here with our greenery, our leaves. We're going to be using 3 colors. We're going to use 3011, 522, and 935. You can really start with any one of them. I'm going to start with 3011 just because it's kind of like the medium shade. And I'm gonna fill in little section by little section. So you're gonna be using all 6 strands. Probably wanna use your needle that has the little bit of the larger eye here, just because it's gonna be a little easier to work with. And we're gonna do a loop stitch. If you've never done a loop stitch before, I'm gonna show you how to do it right now. It is such a cool stitch. It looks amazing. And it's going to create this beautiful lush texture at the top of our tree here. It can just be a little bit tricky until you get the feel of it, but luckily you have lots of space to practice. If you start doing loop stitch and you don't like it, you could do 2 to 3 wrap French knots to fill in all of this space. But basically, I want you to think about like each little section on its own. So let's start with this section right here. And I want to cover about 1/3 of this with loop stitch with 3011, all 6 strands. So you can really start wherever. I'm going to start right here. You're going to come up through the fabric and you're going to make a down stitch a very short space away. So not even maybe like a full stitch length, like a really short little stitch length away. And you're going to pull through, but you're not going to pull all the way through. Let me turn this a little bit so you can see. You can see I left a little loop out here. It's kind of nice and 3D. Now, you're going to choose another spot to come up through the fabric. I'm going to go a different direction this time. Be careful when you come up through the fabric for your next stitch. You want to stop right when you feel the thread hit the back of the fabric. See that one? I actually pulled a little too tight because my previous loop flattened out. And if that happens, you can just go in with your needle and pick it back up again. I'm going to go about a stitch length away, and I'm going to pull through. I'm going to come up in a new spot. It does not matter where. Remember, we're just simply trying to fill about 1/3 of this space with the loops using 3011 first. So there's really no right or wrong. This is actually a super fun stitch because of that, but it can be also a little intimidating because there's no like exact way that you have to do it. I know it looks kind of funky right now. It always does until we start filling in. And we're also going to begin to like loop these over one another, and that's what's really going to give us the texture that we're looking for. But right now I'm just kind of starting with some random spots. So one thing you can do, and I like to do this more with other colors, but I'll show you a little bit right here, is loop one loop on top of another one. And that'll really start to build it up. Just remember, you're going to be varying your direction a little bit as you go. That's going to give it a more natural look. So I've finished about all I want for 3011 in this first section. I still have quite a bit of green thread left because I had to tie off and get some more. So if you do, don't waste all that thread. Go ahead and just keep filling in with some more loops into the next sections. And then you can choose if you want to go ahead and fill in all of these sections with your 3011 first. You could definitely do that, or you could work section by section, which is what I'm going to do just so I can show you, you know, kind of how it's going to turn out and how it'll look when you're done. But I still have quite a bit of 3011 left on my needle here, so I'm not going to waste that. I'm going to continue going into the next section until I run out of thread, and then I'll circle back and show you how to completely continue to fill in that first section. Again, if you're having trouble with loop stitch, you can always switch to French knots. They would look also fabulous, and they make great greenery. But this is a really good place to practice loop stitch because we're going to be doing it for a long time. And just, again, remember, it's going to look funky right now until we start really getting those other colors in here and looping our loops through each other. So in a moment, you'll be able to see how this is all going to come together. Okay, so I finished up with that thread 3011. I'm going to do 6 strands of 935 now, and I'm going to start filling in about another third of this blank space with loop stitch using 6 strands of 935. Now this is where you really want to start having some fun and experimenting with putting your loops over each other. So I have this one right here, so I'm going to loop this one and cover that space and kind of loop it over that one. You don't have to do that every time, but it does add more dimension to your greenery for sure. So I'm just gonna come in here and continue filling in space. And it's no big deal if you get done with one of these colors and feel like you didn't put enough of that color in, you can always go back and add more of that color. Because I know we're just kind of eyeballing exactly how many to put in. Keeping in mind, I'm only going to be filling with one more color after this one to get this whole space filled in. So the more I kind of get these loops combined and going over and through each other, the more 3D look we're going to have here. So you can kind of see how this is starting to come together. Okay, now here's where you can really start to see it come together. I am now using all 6 strands of 522, and I'm working to just fill in as much of that remaining space as I can with loop stitch. And a lot of these, pretty much all these, I'm kind of putting over other loops just to go from space to space that is not yet filled in. If you have spaces that it's a little too much with this color to fill in, we can always go back in at the end and put in a few more loops with one of our other greens, just depending on how things kind of started to fill out for you as you were working. But it'll look great no matter how you do it. So this is just where it really starts to look so beautiful and all come together. And you're doing loops over loops over loops, getting a really nice 3D effect. Come down here. And this edge is just kind of like a guideline. You don't have to get it perfectly that shape. If it goes a little bit more out, that's totally fine. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to fill each of these greenery sections with your loop stitch. I'm going to keep working on this. So I've got this whole little section filled in now. I had some leftovers, so that's why there's more up here. So you can kind of choose if you want to take one color and take it all the way across and get all the loops filled in with that color, and then do the next color and then do the third color. You could do that. You could work a little bit more, like maybe a couple sections at a time, especially since these ones are smaller. You might want to fill in like maybe this one, this one, this one, and this one, and this one, or this one, and this one. However you really want to get it done, you're just going to be filling them all in, mindful that whatever the third sort of color that you choose is going to be more prevalent. So in this one, that lighter sort of sagey green is a bit more noticeable, but that may not be the exact same in all of them if I end up kind of having a third color be different. The other two will be sort of like your undertones. So this is really a free choice kind of area of the hoop to work on, of the design, and you can do it any way that you want to. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, if the loop stitch is not working for you, you can just fill in with French knots instead. That's going to look really great as well. And just be mindful that you also are going to be using a lot of these green threads. We'll pretty much probably be using the whole rest, almost the whole skein of each one. So make sure that if you have a bunch of extra thread left on your needle, you do kind of continue to fill in towards the other sections so that we don't waste that thread. And yeah, go ahead and get all that done. This is definitely a lengthy part of the project, but once you're done, it's going to look oh so beautiful. Okay, now that we got the leaves done, let's work our way down. Let's start with the big cafe or twinkle lights. We're going to use 2 strands of 844 and just back stitch over the string that is holding up the twinkle lights. So you're just going to back stitch this. Remember, for back stitch, you're going to come up a stitch length away from your previous stitch every time, and then go back down through the previous hole. So you'll go all the way across here, all the way across there, and then you can come down here and you can also go all the way across this little strand right here as well. Okay, Next, we're going to fill in each of the little lights. You're going to use 3 strands of 30-45, and we're going to do French knots over each dot. Now, for the ones that go along the 2 big strands, I like to do a 3-wrap French knot. And then for these ones that hang down underneath the tree, just because this is a little bit smaller for space, I like to do 2-wrap French knots. So quickly, I know we did a little bit of a French knot tutorial over there. I'll show you again real fast. But if you need extra guidance on French knots, I do have a French knot tutorial on my YouTube channel as well, so you could go find that. But you're gonna put your needle underneath the thread and wrap it around 3 times. Then you can angle your needle and put it back down through the thread right next to where you came up. Hold the excess thread with your non-stitching hand tight or taut. Push your needle down through the knot, and then finally you can let go. And there we go. There's our French knot. So you're going to fill in 1 3-wrap French knot for each of these dots, and then a 2, you could do a 1 or a 2-wrap French knot for each of these. I'm going to do 2-wrap. So once you get that done, then we'll move on. All right, let's work on our little swing now. We're going to use 3 strands of 38-63, and we're going to start by back stitching down the ropes that hold up the swing. You can make this one go over that twinkle light line if you want. So I want the swing to be in the foreground. So go ahead and backstitch all the way down and then all the way back up, and then I'll show you what to do next. We're actually going to turn it into a whipped backstitch. Okay, now we're going to make this into whipped backstitch. So continue with 3 strands of 38-63. You're going to come up right at the end or at the beginning of one of your rope lines, and you're going to push your needle underneath that first stitch and pull it through. And then you're going to come back to the side that you started on, push your needle underneath the second stitch, and pull through. Now, if you're using stick and stitch paper, sometimes your needle can want to kind of go underneath that stick and stitch paper. So take your non-stitching hand and push up underneath, right underneath the stitch that you're trying to go under. And that way you can kind of angle your needle up and out. And that way also your needle won't get stuck in any of the other stitches that are nearby as well. When you're doing whipped backstitch, you always want to start from the same side. This part's a little tricky just because I got to go through those French knots. Okay. So I am going from the right of this line every time. It doesn't really matter which way you go from, just as long as you keep it consistent. And then once you get to the end, you're just going to make a down stitch, and you're going to repeat that for the other rope line as well. Okay, continuing with 3 strands of 38-63, you're just going to horizontally satin stitch in the seat on the swing. So just start at the top and use your satin stitch to go all the way down to the bottom. Then we're going to add one more little detail in here. Okay, finally you're going to take 2 strands of 844 and you're going to come up in the middle to one side of the swing, about the middle, and just pull a little strand all the way across, just one straight stitch. And then on each side, we're going to add a little 1-wrap French knot. So I'm going to add one on the top. And then I'm going to add one on the bottom. And I'll repeat that on the other side as well. One here and one here. Okay, for our lanterns, we're going to be using just one strand of 844. For each of the strings hanging down, it's going to be the same technique for all three, so I'm just going to show you this one right here. You're going to backstitch down the line, or the string that's holding the lantern up to start. When you get to this top little dot on the lantern, you're going to make a little 3-wrap French knot. 1, 2, 3. Oops. 1, 2, 3. And then for each line on the lantern, you're just going to do a straight stitch. So I'll go up to that French knot. I'll go up to it right here. I'm going to pull one line across. I'll make a straight stitch here. And another one right here. And another one here. And another one here. And then on the bottom, you can just do a couple of them right next to each other, just so it's a little bit thicker there. Also going to do one right here. Now these little lines in here are going to be yellow. They're going to be like our light that's coming from the lantern, so you can leave those for now. So on this one over here, same thing. You'll do back stitch down, 3-wrap French knot, and then fill in each line, except for those middle ones, with one strand of 844. Same thing on this one, but leave those 3 little light lines. We'll fill those in a moment. All right, I am using one strand of 3045, and I'm just going to make 3 little lines on the inside of each lantern, just to sort of give it this glowing effect. Oops. And these are just straight stitches. I'm kind of making mine all meet up at the same point. So just like that, and I'm going to repeat that on the other 2 lanterns as well. Okay, let's make the tassels. Each lantern has 1 tassel on it. I'm going to show you how to make a tassel here and then just tell you the colors. So for this one, we're using all 6 strands of 814. For this one right here, we're going to use all 6 strands of 522. And then for this one over here, we're going to use all 6 strands of 3773. So here's how you make a tassel. You're going to come up through the fabric, right where that little dot is at the top of the tassel, and you're going to go back down through that same hole that you just came up through. Careful not to go right through your knot. So you can take your non-stitching hand and pull that knot to the side just a little bit so that you can angle your needle back down through that same hole. Before you pull all the way through, you're going to leave a loop out that's about like this long. And then you're going to come up just to the right of that loop. Pull up. Once your thread hits the back of the fabric, stop pulling, because if you keep pulling, you're going to shorten your loop. So just go until it hits the back of the fabric, and then you're going to make a down stitch right on the other side of the loop to anchor that loop into place. When you're done with that, you can go ahead and tie off a knot, and I'll show you the next part. Okay, now you're going to take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut through the end of that loop, and then you can trim the tassel down to the length that you want it to be. So I'm just going to cut it off right about here. And there we go. I have a cute little tassel hanging down from my lantern. So now you're going to repeat with this one and this one. And again, this one right here is going to be all 6 strands of 522, and this one over here is going to be all 6 strands of 3773. 1 tassel on each lantern. Okay, next we're going to fill in the grass down here, and don't worry, I have not forgotten about these little spaces right here. Those are flowers, the same that these are going to be flowers, so I like to do that all at once at the end. So what I am using is 3 strands of 3013. And I'm going to be filling in all of this grass area with a back split stitch. And I'll kind of show you what I do for direction here. I'm going to start by using the outline of this patch of grass for my directional guideline. And anytime I get to the flowers, I just want to skip and work around them. So now I'll fill from here over to here. And then I'm going to go back right next to that and just keep working in that same direction, filling in right next to my stitches that I've already made. And I'm going to continue to do that. So I'm going to get all of this space filled in, kind of working in this direction. Once I get down here, I can start to make my direction go a little bit more from up and above. So I'll kind of fill in like this way, and then it'll sort of get more straight up and down at the bottom, and then we'll fan out in this direction once we get over here. But I'll periodically come back on here and show you as I'm kind of gradually changing directions here. Okay, so I've filled in this part over here. Now now I'm just going to kind of like gradually make my stitches go a little bit more vertically. So I'm going to keep kind of following this direction, and as I get here, you can still keep them kind of going this direction, and then maybe make them go a little bit more vertically right here. And then as we get to this side, we're going to move them more out towards this direction. The space over here is a little bit small, so sometimes if you just want to even fit 1 stitch in there, so instead of trying to fit 2 in to get that back split stitch, that's totally fine. Another thing to note here is that these are just like ideas for where we're going to put the flowers, so if you kind of stitch over a little bit or not quite to one of the lines, that's totally fine, because we're going to fill it in completely with French knots, so we'll be able to cover anything, any negative space we'll be able to cover with our French knots. That's why I like to start with the grass first, so that we can fill that in if we need to. As you can see here, I'm doing just a little bit more of a satin stitch since this is such a small space in between these 2 blobs where the flowers are going to go. And now that I'm right here, I might start to kind of go back into back split stitch. So I get that textured look. So anyways, continue filling in until you have all of this filled in down here. All right, so now that I'm starting to go over on this side, I'm just angling my stitches more towards this direction so that when I get to the top, I'll be able to fill in that line and everything will be nice and curvy up here, and then it kind of straightens out down here. So go ahead and get all of the remaining grass filled in, and then we will go over how to make our florals. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to create the floral clusters that are spilling off the perch here, and then also they're going to be filling in all of our blank space that we have left down here. So I'm going to show you right here how to fill in one cluster, and then that's going to be the same technique you use for filling all of them in. So I'm starting with all 6 strands of 8/14. These are going to be our biggest French knots. We're going to do 3 wraps. 1, 2, 3. And I like to make, 2 or 3 of those per little cluster. Obviously down here for this one, you're going to make, just kind of space them out. You might make like 10 of them. A couple here, maybe 1 or 2 here, 1 here, 1 here, a couple here, a couple here. You get the idea. It does not matter where you put them. You're just gonna space them out and put in a few. I'm gonna put 3 right here. So you could do that for all of your little sections, or you could work section by section. Again, it's up to you. I'm just going to show you how to complete one section right now so you can see the whole process, and then you can fill them in however you wish. Then, using all 6 strands of 402, you're going to make a couple 2-wrap French knots within each section as well. So these will end up being a little bit smaller. Whoops. Really, you can put in as many as you like. I'm going to put 4 in here. Okay. Now I'm switching to 3 strands of 3773, and I'm going to fill in a couple or a few 3-wrap French knots. So these will be just a little bit daintier. And we only have 1 more color, so just keep that in mind as you're filling in. So you can put a few in here. This technique sort of varies the size of our French knots, so we get a really unique and pretty cluster of little flowers. I'm gonna put 1 more up here. And lastly, I'm going to use 3 strands of 3045, and I'm going to fill in any remaining space with 1 to 2 wrap French knots. So I like these to be quite a bit tinier than our other ones. You could make some of them 2 wraps, some of them 1 wrap. And you just want to fill in as many as you need to get the remaining space all filled in. You're just going to repeat this technique for all of our little spaces that we need to put flowers in. Obviously, this is our biggest one down here, and you don't have to do it this way. I just wanted to show you one full section. So, when you're working down here, you can put in all of your ones with that kind of magenta color first, and then go in and fill with the next color and the next color and so forth. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to get your floral clusters filled in. Once you do that, we're all done stitching. We just need to add our beads. All right, all my florals are done. The last thing we're gonna do is add in our beading. So you're going to use your tiny-eyed beading needle, and I'm using just 1 strand of 3782 since it's like the lightest color that we have. You do want to use a light color just because we're going to be pulling across the back, so we don't want any thread to show through. So what you want to do first is you want to pour your little kind of brown crystal colored beads into a shallow dish, plate, bowl, bottle cap, anything that is going to have kind of like a shallow rim. Ignore these stars, those are for a different project, but these are the beads that we're using. And you're going to come up through the fabric right to one side of any dot. You can start anywhere. And you're going to get one bead onto your needle. Push it all the way down to the fabric. And then these dots are about the width of these beads. So basically what you can do is just put your needle down on the other side of the dot and pull it through. And that's going to anchor that bead right into place. So then I'll go to my next one. Get another bead. Make my down stitch just on the other side of that dot. And my bead is anchored into place. So you're going to put one of these beads on each little dot. I like the sort of iridescent color of these beads. They just kind of make the whole pattern have a shimmer to it. Almost like, I almost picture like little firefly light in the background here. So you're going to get one bead onto each dot. If you run out of thread, you can just tie off and then start with another strand. And once you get that all done, we are done with this project. Well, done with the stitching part. All right, we are all done stitching the Perfect Perch. If you need help on the finishing steps, washing away your stabilizer, or if you did trace to transfer, or how to back your hoop, you're going to go to the Finishing Steps YouTube link, and I have a full tutorial there on how I back my hoops and all that good stuff. I hope that you enjoyed this project. This one ended up being pretty detailed, but it is so cute, and I hope that you can join me again for another whimsical, magical embroidery adventure.